So, do partnerships ever work actually? Partnership is an interesting animal. Many people start their businesses with partnerships, and there are different kinds of it, right? Over the last 20 plus years that I've been in business, helping small businesses grow and really build a business that changes lives, including the life of the entrepreneur, I focused on understanding why partnerships rarely work. And to give you a little background, I've worked with a number of partnerships over the years. Most of them didn't survive. And so when I wrote my first book, Dream Bold, Start Smart, initially in the first part of the book, in chapter one, part one, chapter five, I believe, the initial title of the chapter was Partnerships Never Work. And then as I wrote the book and I went into editing and I went to the publisher asked me to change the title to be a less provocative one. And so I did. And I've changed the title to be Do You Need a Partner kind of thing. And in the chapter, I talk about several examples of businesses that came to me that I worked with, and they've had a really negative experience with partnerships. And so if you read my book, you will kind of find out, but I'll give you the gist of it, right? One of the clients came to me in 2019, having been through a partnership. And one day he basically showed up to the warehouse and he took the position of, okay, I'm going to deal with sales, you deal with the operations and financial stuff. And it worked really well for a few years. They made a lot of money. Or so he thought. And one day he shows up at the warehouse and the warehouse is completely cleaned out. All of the trucks, all of the equipment have been taken. His QuickBooks Access, the accounting system, has been removed. And he was nowhere to be found, partner. And so it took him a little bit to kind of figure things out and to move into, a different but tangentially related line of business. And that's when I met him. And so that story and a number of other stories horror stories where partnerships broke up fairly quickly sometimes, and sometimes it took years for them to break up, I talk about in my book, right? And so for a number of years, so I started in accounting and small business in 2005. So for a number of years, I've held this belief that partnerships never work. And what I found was that its partnerships can work. And so in the last few years, as I got into psychology and I got a degree in psychology and Gestalt psychology, I found that partnerships can work. The only difference is that they need help. But let's look first at why people start partnerships, in my experience. Oftentimes, when people start a business, they feel like, and especially women, and that's my experience. I did not do a study on it, but I did sort of do a study on my own clients and the clients that I've worked with through different parts of their businesses. I've seen that often women go into a business or start something with a partner thinking that it'll be easier. But as that client who got the warehouse cleaned out overnight put it, partnership is just like marriage, just without the benefits. And he's right. And I think it's funny because it's absolutely true. But in my book and also here, I will tell you that there are different kinds of partnerships. Partnerships can work really well when there is one active partner who drives the business and then other partners who are mere investors, passive, not involved in the day-to-day operations. They're financing the whole ordeal, and that's it. Those partnerships work all the time. Things like PayPal and other startups have often worked like that, essentially, where there was one main person driving the business. And of course, one entrepreneur is not enough to make a business successful. That's just the reality. Even having built my own business over time and having helped other entrepreneurs build their businesses, what I found is that they typically are self-made human beings, but also supported by other people. So just like for me, I've met the right teachers. My family has been very supportive. I've met different people at different stages of my life who've really helped me make the most out of myself. It's similar or the same for everybody else. And so um, that's kind of why typically there is that kind of partnerships, when there are partnerships where there's one main driver of the business and visionary, and then everybody else is kind of not really involved, maybe involved in a supportive function like a COO maybe or whatever, but not really otherwise. So that's that. When you have a partnership where there's more than one active partner and business manager, that's when you'll have an issue, because there will always be, people's lives sometimes go separate ways, meaning one person gets married, gets a family, the other stays single for a long time. And so their priorities, their goals, their dreams, their aspirations are very different from each other. And so it's impossible for one to understand the values of the other and vice versa, because their value systems are different and their realities are different. And so that's kind of when you start having issues and things like, and I talk about this in my book, where it's, let's say one has a special needs child and needs to work more from home. The other one shows up in the office and feels like he's doing all the work or she's doing all the work. And so all kinds of things like that. And multiply that by 10, 100, 1,000, you get kind of the gist of why. For a long time, I've believed that partnerships rarely work well. And obviously, there's also other types of partnerships where those are mere investments, like real estate and things like that. But we're talking specifically about active partnerships, when more than one person is involved in managing the business and being a visionary for that business. Now, can these partnerships actually work? Well, as I said, in the last few years, I got a degree in psychology. And having gone through that process, having learned group therapy, group psychology, I found that, yes, it's possible. And I decided to change my mind and kind of to go back on my initial belief that partnerships never work. But partnerships could work, can work, right? Obviously, the limited partnerships where there's a bunch of limited partners and one driver, but for active partnerships that we talk about, partnerships can work with the right facilitation, oftentimes kind of mediation by a skilled professional, someone who has done this before. And so what I do and what I've done over the course of my career is I have brought to the table partners who had those different realities, different context, and I brought them together for the sake of the business and the good of the business first, and then the good of the actual partners of the business as well. It's not always perfect, and it's definitely work, but a skillfully facilitated work between partners is often essential. Sometimes it's also essential to happen between the key players of the business. Maybe they're not equity partners, but maybe they're top managers. Maybe they're top visionaries of the business, or both. And so having a skilled facilitator for a group of people where I could bring all of those people together at a table and have a conversation. And it's not an hour-long meeting. It's typically half a day to a day type situation, sometimes multiple days. Sometimes it's multiple days together in a row, or sometimes it's multiple days spread over the course of the week or a month or whatever. There's a million ways to do this, but the actual way for a specific business depends on, again, what the values are. And so my goal is to always look for, if people are, number one, good people, if they're willing to work together for the greater good, if one of the parties involved wants to screw someone else over, I can't work with a partnership like that because there's nothing I can do to kind of change that personality. And so that's an underlying premise, and that even if someone says, yes, I'm like that, typically what I would do is I would observe and probe and notice things just to make sure that I can confirm my kind of feeling around that person and what they're saying. And generally speaking, I work with the business for a while to help them figure out their relationship and make sure that everybody's voice is heard, but at the same time that we're working on the greater good for the entire company and each of the key players individually as well. So bottom line, partnerships could work, active partnerships could work, but generally speaking, it's very rare that partners can figure it out on their own simply because you don't have the skills to actually have that conversation facilitated by someone who's a disinterested party, like myself and other facilitators who have psychological background as well as business background. I hope that that was useful, and I'll talk to you guys soon.